And again, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Jasper Fforde. The new book is The Woman Who Died a Lot. It is out now and is a GoodReads Choice nominee for Best Fantasy Novel. Although, who knows, it could be in many different categories, considering its hybrid nature. So let's see, this is a question from Tina Jameson. I imagine this is a question you get quite a lot because you've got a background in film as well as in writing. If they, and they is in quotes here, were able to turn any of the Thursday Next novels into a movie, who would you like to see cast as Thursday? And then in parentheses it says, don't restrict yourself to mundane things like people who are alive and kicking.
I don't know. I mean, playing Thursday, I think it would probably have to be a fantastically talented actress whom we didn't recognise, because I think there's a sort of suspension of disbelief in the book. Certainly, when you're reading the books, you have to kind of just let go a bit and sort of, you know, let it take you on, take you over. And I think if they were doing a movie, a big star, then you'd be saying, that's so-and-so playing Thursday.
Right.
You see such and such depiction of Thursday. And I think that would kind of detract from the adventure, really, because it's all about her and what happens to her. So I kind of, would say an unknown, a fantastically talented unknown. Someone who's been working in theatre, of course, completely unknown, would be great. But it wouldn't be up to me, of course. It would be up to the budget. The bigger the budget, the bigger the draw, and the more famous the star. So, it all gets taken out of your hands, to be honest. But no, someone unknown, I think, would be really nice.
Yeah. So this is a question from Catherine, and this is a broader question, but Catherine asks, I was wondering if you could talk about how you go about writing from the point of view of a female protagonist. Is there any challenge to that versus writing a man?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I mean, I didn't know that this was unusual or even of note, in fact, the fact that I was writing first person as a woman, until about 2 or 3 years after I wrote it, when I had this very question, and I had to sort of think for a moment and go, that's a good question, why? I think the reason was, quite simply, is that I started off, the first 2 books I wrote had a male protagonist, but I enjoyed writing the female characters round him because I thought they were more interesting. And then Thursday came along, and this book, The Aerofair, and I started writing as female. And originally it was third person, and then I wasn't really getting into her head, so I thought, well, let's make it first person. And I did that, and all of a sudden I was kind of writing as a woman. I never really thought about it. But all writing, of course, is sort of observational. Mm-hmm. So in that respect, I think you just have to kind of look around you and kind of think, well, how would she think, or how would I think if I were a woman or something? And I think that's really kind of what you do. But there's no sort of conscious. I don't really take any sort of conscious feel about it. And now Thursday is such a sort of rounded character, and I know her really, really well. Whenever I'm writing a sequel, I actually just sit down and put the situation in and who's in the room and get her to start talking. And there she is. She has a very sort of fully formed voice when she comes out. When one of our Thursdays is missing, it's a kind of version of Thursday. So I had to actually think about having a Thursday that wasn't quite a Thursday. So it's interesting, but there's no real sort of it's difficult to put down sort of nuts and bolts to it. I just kind of know her quite well.
Yeah.
Put her in the situation and kind of listen to the voice that I can hear in the back of my head.
And how's that different when you're starting a new series or you're working on, like you've got the Shades of Grey series, you've got The Last Dragon Slayer, is it? Yeah. I mean, what's the sort of take on how you approach those as opposed to another Thursday book? Is there a difference there?
It's quite easy actually to just say, right, this is a Shades of Grey book, or this is a Dragon Slayer book. You just kind of switch it off, and because I write so intently, when I'm writing, I tend to write over about 7 months, and I'm writing almost every day, 6 days a week, and you get so sort of hung up in the characters and the situations and everything like that. It kind of makes it a lot easier to actually write doing that. If I were to have to write a bit of one book one day and then a bit of another book the other day, I think I'd get it all sort of terribly mixed up and it would look hideous. But it's really sort of immersive kind of way of writing that enables me to keep keep track of what everyone's doing and the subtleties of character, of course, because it's the subtleties, I think, that really make them come alive and really make them sort of live in the book.
Right. This is a question, speaking of the Shades of Grey series, this is from Sophia Cassie, and she asks, I love that Shades of Grey has a humorous take on what can be a pretty depressing genre, the post-apocalyptic dystopia. They're generally not feel-good stories, those books. I guess you did something similar for mystery novels with Thursday Next. Is turning genres on their heads something that you enjoy, or is that incidental, and are there any other genres that you want to tackle? I know we talked earlier about how you don't tend to think of that, but is there something down the road you're going to write horror or something like that? Or
yeah, I think so. I mean, I like taking the ideas. I wanted to write a post-apocalyptic novel, and I thought, right, how is the usual way in which people do this, and how can I invert this and look at it in a totally fresh eye? And I have a sort of a rough list of tenets by which I write by, one of which is take the less well-trodden path. Where when you write it, or in life you can as well. And when you think, right, well, I'll go down this way. If you're going to write a future dystopia, it's usually like 6 months, a year after the society has fallen. And I'm going, no, let's make it like 1,400 years after. Let's make it so that people have actually no interest in what happened, or they don't care, they don't know what went on. Right. And just look at a kind of new world order in this kind of post-apocalyptic way, and kind of see what comes out. And I do that with the nursery crime series as well. It's really taking a very tired genre, which the crime novel is, let's face it, and turning all the tropes on their heads in a manner in which I can still use them, which seems kind of odd. So it's sort of making fun of the genre and inverting it in an amusing way. It's the same with The Last Dragon Slayer. It's, how can you write a book about dragons and magic that is sort of amusing and fresh and a little bit different. Yeah. So it's really just, head for that less well-trodden path.
All right. Let's see. This is a question I think is kind of fun. This is from Samuel Siave. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Do you think croquet could make it as an Olympic sport?
Oh, but it isn't, to be honest. For anyone who's ever played croquet, and I mean proper croquet, not the sort of golf croquet, but the really, really difficult croquet. And if you've ever seen it being played, it's astonishing. And it has a very special sort of, part in my heart, really, because I'm not a big player of team sports. I'm not very keen on team sports, but it's one of the very few sports that doesn't require an umpire or a referee. And that's, I don't play golf, but I have a huge amount of respect for the game because you don't have a referee.
Right.
It's all about sportsmanship. Same with croquet. You have two players and you are self-refereeing, and you never ever need an umpire. If you do, you go and ask someone from another game just to come over and look as so I really like that, and it should be an Olympic sport, and I think it'll come around.
All right, we'll look for that in I don't know, whatever that would be, 2016 or something.
I don't see that. I don't think the Brazilians playing it, to be honest. I mean, I think we had our chance, this year, and we blew it, basically. Totally blew it.
This would have been the year, yeah. I think this would have been the year to launch it.
It's just not going to happen until we get it again. That's another, 60 years ago.
Let's see. This is a question from Lynn Strickland. How does your photography background influence your writing, and vice versa?
I don't know, actually, to be honest. It's been a sort of engaging hobby, really, since I was very small. And I built a darkroom in the cupboard under the stairs in a sort of rather corny fashion. Everyone seems to do that when they're little. I don't really know. It kind of attracts me to the film industry, so that probably attracts me towards story. So I tend to look at things kind of visually. But it's difficult to say for sure, really. I'd have to have run my life again and without it, and see what came out. I'd probably have more time, certainly. And I wouldn't have got rid of all the warts on my hands, because I had terrible warts on my hands. I don't now, obviously. There's no point in changing. Huh. Real big, big warts, like sort of witches have on their nose. And I could not get rid of them at all until I started working in the darkroom. And the fixer got rid of them completely.
I've heard that's a cure-all, actually, for warts. Yeah.
So if you want to go, no one does chemical photography, but so anyway, so it got rid of my warts. So there you go.
Okay, this is from Kevin Magpock. Kevin asks, what's involved in juggling what's now 4 different series all ongoing at the same time? How do you decide how to distribute the time spent working on each one?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I tend to just pick a book and then go with it and forget about all the rest. Choosing which one to do is, something we're obviously, one of the downsides of doing series is, of course, that once you have a lot of series, then you have a lot of people who want their favourite book next. So I, get a lot of questions. When is the next Shades of Grey? When is the next, nursery crime? And it's just a question of, trying to, fulfil all these problems and move on and get them all done. The next one I'm writing is, the one I'm writing at the moment, is the third in the Dragon Slayer series, Return of Shandar. But after that, I'm going to move on to a standalone, which I've been trying to do for a number of years now.
Interesting.
I think that's sort of important just to kind of stretch and flex. Because I always think that any author, of course, is just practicing until he writes a fantastic novel that will make my name live beyond eternity, he says rather loftily. So, I just like to move around, work on this, work on that, and occasionally do a standalone book.
Right. Let's see. This is from Barbara. Barbara asks, are you able to enjoy reading other writers' fiction while you're immersed in Thursday's world? Because it's so much about books and reading. Does that affect your ability to read and do that while you're working? Oh,